Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Rambo edition. Or is it First Blood edition? It's hard to say. I think it's the Rambo edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I am from the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, of course, your friend and mine, Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Give it to me, Tom.
What you choose to call hell, he calls home. You know where you stand in a hellhole. Folks lend a hand in a hellhole. You know you're in for something special when, in the first few seconds of the first sequel, they've already accidentally quoted Spinal Tap lyrics.
Oh my goodness gracious. That's fantastic. I'm dumbfounded by these movies.
To be fair, I mean, my choice of one-liners was about a page long.
Yeah, of course.
Mostly from
I was going to say that one line is one of several refrains from Colonel Troutman about how you're going to get some comeuppance.
They're mostly, yeah.
Remember this about Rambo.
We'll get there, but there is a scene. There is an interrogation scene in Rambo 3 that serves purely to elicit one-liners about Rambo from Troutman.
Yeah,
and then just everything that the Russian general Jason, whatever he's called, Zason. It's not Jason,
right.
Is it? It must be Zason. Says it's just a setup. every single thing he says. It's not a question. It's just a setup for a one-liner.
I so want to talk about that moment in that film right now this second, but like you said, we'll have to wait. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're here, of course, for a minisode. We are here to rank these sequels and declare them good or bad.
Why are you laughing already?
I'm...
As if the thought of it is just ridiculous.
It is a little bit. I mean, okay. Here's the thing about these sequels. You can divide the sequels in half, in my mind.
Boy, you can. You said a mouthful.
I mean, the first two sequels are such a product of their time. They're such 80s movies. And then the last two are so divergent from those two movies. So to me, it's an interesting exercise in ranking them and declaring them good or bad because, again, it gives a clue to, at least for each of us, what we value in movies. So I am...
And what we value in sequels.
Right.
Definitely. I mean...
Yeah.
I was particularly drawn to that watching these movies...
like back to back,
over the past week. Because, I mean, as far as I can tell, the critical consensus is that these movies get progressively worse over time. And...
Well...
and that kind of politically...
The first...
And in terms of filmmaking quality, they completely, they decline to a crushing nadir. But, a lot of that is held... in relation to First Blood, the movie that all these movies is to some extent based on, and how respected and loved a movie that was.
Right, and that's the other thing, is that they're all so different from that first movie.
And we embrace that.
Because I watched that first movie recently, too.
Me too.
Well, so... You take a movie, especially, and it's an unusual movie for 1982.
It's a 70s movie made 2 years too late.
Right. But I'm astonished when I watch that movie and think to myself, this movie has something to say.
Yeah.
And it's saying something about serving this country and what it can do to your mind and your body long before we were ever talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, let's not bury the lead here. We're not talking about that movie, Mike.
I know.
But what I was going to say...
I'm just saying it's worth noting.
It is worth noting.
Because all the sequels... I guess my point is all the sequels just completely deny that.
Well, we'll get there. I mean,
Not maybe completely, but...
They go back and forth, I think, is a
Okay.
fairer thing to say. You're not wrong, but you're not also entirely right, I don't think, overall.
I think you're right in the sense that I might have barricaded myself behind a wall that I shouldn't have started building.
Well, I mean, but
I
that's
think the movies.
So
what I would say is that the sequels try to speak to what the first movie spoke to, but they don't do it as well, and
well, you'll get no argument.
And at times they do it so poorly that you just think, "Fuck, does anybody remember that first movie?"
But here's where I think our project is different from the majority of film lovers and critics who are going to be tackling these movies. Is that on this podcast, our mission is to embrace differences in sequels and to judge every movie on its own merits. And I think it's interesting to me because the majority of the criticism is based around the fact that this is a portrayal of the vision that First Blood set out for the Rambo character and for the world it was creating. That's what the majority of the snobbery around these movies comes from. But, you know, we go back to that age-old question. Well, I say age-old, that at least on this podcast, of how much should a sequel nod to the original? And I'll barricade myself behind a wall that says, for the most part, I think these movies walk that tightrope quite well. Of acknowledging where it came from, but doing something entirely different. And entirely different each time. Notice there's no quality judgments there. That is
right.
I'm simply talking about, you know, whether they mention the original, how they mention the original, how they depart from it.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Those can
I'll give
be
you that.
vastly different in terms of whether or not they're good and bad decisions, but I feel like this is a series that wants to acknowledge its past. The level of success of that is a totally different story.
All right.
But this, this was for me, having come off the Harry Potter movies, this is has been a great palate cleanser. We're looking at,
Sorry.
It's refreshing.
I just love that you consider. You know, I think the high point for this series is one of the movies has a body count of like 466, and you're deftly describing it as a palate cleanser.
That's right.
It's great.
Well,
that's great.
In terms of it being refreshing that we're able to talk about an actor, writer, producer, director, and apparently editor who we have mutual admiration for.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I grew up with Sylvester Stallone and his movies.
Yeah, and actually,
with a lot of affection for his movies.
I have a lot of affection too, and I wanted to. I mean, I don't think we made that clear when we did our Rocky IV breaking news episode. What Stallone heads we are, largely because we're talking about a string of bad decisions that he made, but so it's not really our fault. But I want to ask you a question to see how deep in the hellhole you are. Okay, So how blind are you to how bad Stallone can be sometimes? Where are you? How far in the hole are you? Because I'm pretty far down.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I was ruminating on that quite a bit as I was watching these movies. I would actively start thinking, okay, is this bad acting or is he so deep into the character? Like I would find myself starting to defend him even as I was actively thinking, well, that's not too good right there. And I would try to find little outs for myself.
This is it. I was just going to say, like, where do you draw the line? What do you give him a pass on?
Yeah.
Because my sense of that seems to differ greatly from, my fellow film goers and fellow film critics.
Right. Well, you mentioned that you felt like this series gets viewed by critics as getting progressively worse.
Yeah.
They're all roughly the same if you take into account, say, Rotten Tomatoes. Rambo 2 was at 35%, 39% for Rambo 3. I think it's 38% for Rambo. There's a dip for Last Blood where it goes down to 26% for whatever that's worth. And, well, I myself was rather astonished to see that there wasn't a bigger dip for Rambo Last Blood, but but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the sense I get. I think it's
But those first three, they're all they're really close to each other.
I think so, but it's interesting. I think this is a really good test of our respective biases towards Stallone, because starting with Rambo means that you can't justify it intellectually in the way that you would, say, the Rocky series or Demolition Man, which is a work of satire.
Yeah.
You also can't, I could defend Rocky movies intellectually for the most part. I could also defend the Expendables because it's basically a live action cartoon and works brilliantly on that level.
On that level, right?
With this, there's I can't go to either defense really, so it really tests that implicit bias we have, because what's your defense of some of the things that we're seeing on screen.
Right.
And this franchise, I think, I'm overgeneralizing by saying that a lot of people think these movies progressively get worse. Where I'm coming from is firstly that this series never had that latter day rescue that the Rocky series had with Rocky Balboa and the Creed movies, that just completely restored its reputation.
Right. Well, that's one thing that struck me was I thought, what Sylvester Stallone should never do? Make a fifth movie in which he shows shots in the closing credits from the first four movies as a definitive, we did it, everybody, because it's always a sign of he's just made the shittiest movie in the series.
Right. Yeah. Notably, a mistake he makes in both Rambo and Rambo Last Blood, which is very, very notable. I absolutely agree with that, but I also wanted to draw attention to the fact that David Morrell, who wrote the novel that First Blood is based on,
right, but he also wrote novels of the other movies as they came out,
right, and to that point, he, upon seeing Last Blood, he disowned the franchise publicly, and bear in mind, he novelized Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3. This guy's willing to put up with a lot of shit happening to his creation.
Well, and to that point, he's willing to put up with a lot because the first novel is vastly different.
True.
Rambo in that first novel is psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
He kills everybody. He does not, people might forget this, he does not kill anybody in the first movie. Unless you want to talk about Galt in the helicopter.
Helicopter deaths
It's more of an accident. He throws a rock at the helicopter and the guy falls out.
It's that the helicopter deaths don't count.
Right. So he doesn't kill anybody, and at the end of the novel, Troutman actually kills him.
Yeah.
So, to their credit, I think they wanted the character to be more sympathetic in the movie, so that's why the first movie is so vastly different than the novel.
Yeah.
And B, they didn't kill him because they wanted the possibility of more movies. But to see where they choose to go in these sequels is,
yeah,
both astonishing and delightful.
And
and then at times, troubling.
Troubling. That's the perfect way of putting it. I believe actually the decision to not have him either die or commit suicide at the end of First Blood was an on-set decision. That was a call made during filming.
In fact, Kirk Douglas was going to be playing Troutman and dropped out because of them even talking about that this might not happen.
And there's also, I think, I believe there's a number of film critics who have posited the suggestion, a la Indiana Jones is Han Solo's carbonite dream, that everything that happens in the remaining Rambo movies is all going on in Rambo's head in the seconds before he commits suicide.
In jail.
I've heard that theory up until up until Last Blood, that there were people who were still convinced he was going to come out of his kind of delirious PTSD fantasy and kill himself at the end of First Blood.
Wow.
Yeah, which goes to show how divergent these sequels are from the original vision. But that is not automatically a bad thing, in my opinion. And I also wanted to draw attention to how different these movies are from each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yes and no.
That's not always a positive, but it can be a positive. Like, I don't want to see the same sequel over and over again, especially when we're watching.
Well, here's the thing, though. You do.
You do see the same sequel over again?
You do and you don't. These sequels are simultaneously vastly different, but every single sequel essentially has, hey, there's people that need saving, or at least a person that needs saving. He goes in to get them and must escape. That's the plot for every single one. So,
but I think,
for what it's worth,
tonally,
politically, right.
It shifts from movie to movie.
Absolutely.
In very interesting ways, which have a lot to do about what's going on behind the scenes. I don't normally. I try to do as little research as possible before I see the movies, and follow up afterwards if I have to. But I'd rather just talk about it on the podcast and find out things for the first time. Here, the credits of these movies asked so many questions that I had no choice but to follow up. And the answers were even more staggering than I could possibly imagine.
Now, is that something you should save for each episode?
Yeah, it's just there are a lot of let's just as a teaser, I'll say I've seen some credits that I've never seen before or since in any movie appear in the credits of these movies.
All right. Noted. Now, can I assume, as we're about to start ranking these movies, should I just assume that there's a blanket love for number... Are you going for number 3 first because you love all third sequels? Do you just sit in your underwear and watch the third sequel? Like, you're a dirty little sequel. You want me to watch you, don't you? Is it on top?
Everyone's like, don't go in there. He's watching his thirds. Don't go in. He'll be done in like 2 days. He'll work it out of his system. It'll be fine.
Right.
You know what? This again, contrary to popular opinion, these movies bear rewatching because when Last Blood was released in 2019, I watched all the First Blood / Rambo movies again.
And then watched it.
So that's
and then went to see
less
it.
than 2 years ago. I did the same thing that we'd just done in the past week,
Right.
with the exception of First Blood. And although I saw that on TV separately recently, so that's blown that. And I've completely reevaluated from my ranking then to now. Like
It's funny you say that because I kind of had a similar journey.
I had it in my mind that, I mean, partly because it's like, of course the third one is the best because, you know, I'm Tom Stewart and that's what I do, and I approve this message, but
right.
But
all right, give it to me. What's your top
yeah
Rambo sequel?
My top Rambo sequel is Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Whoa, okay. Well, Rambo First Blood Part 2, my top as well.
Interesting. In my rankings, I'm doing something.
I found my top very easy and my bottom very easy. The middle was a bit of a struggle.
Interesting. Upon this viewing, I had no problem ranking. I have a very...
Is that right?
Yeah, no problem ranking. But movies shifted positions from, 18 months ago.
Okay. Now, are you like me? Are you going Rambo Last Blood is the bottom of the barrel?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
You know what? And I was disappointed when I saw it 18 months ago. I was still disappointed this time. I still affection for the very beginning of the movie and the very end of the movie. Everything in between is just such a racist piece of shit. I can't.
So racist. It's so hard to watch. God,
I mean, there's we talk about where do you draw the line on your love of Stallone, and it's when he's slandering an entire country.
Right.
That's where I draw the line.
Agreed. Okay, so where do you go for 3-4?
So are we going top or bottom up or top down?
Go top. Yeah. What's 2? What's 3?
Okay, 2 is Rambo 3. Which, unsurprisingly, 18 months ago, I thought was the best Rambo sequel.
You thought it was the best.
There's
Wow.
a certain euphoria I have for a sequel that has figured out the formula and is just having fun with it.
Yes.
And this is the most fun of all these movies. Right or wrong. Sorry, I had to go Michael Corleone.
I think I disagree with that. I think Rambo First Blood Part 2 is more fun. But that's the thing about these first 2 sequels is that they are fun. The last 2 sequels are devoid of fun at all. So
yeah, I think. Yeah.
But so my journey was when I first saw Rambo Part 3 in the theaters when it first came out.
Yeah.
I remember hating that movie.
Really? I thought that would be way up your alley.
I thought it had fallen so far down a shitty rabbit hole, I was like, I'm done with this series. And then upon this viewing, I'm watching it, and 3/4 of the way through, I thought to myself, why did I hate this movie so much? This is so much fun. And then I saw the end, and I remembered a tank ramming a helicopter, and I thought, that was probably it. That's probably what I fucking hated. That was really dumb. But like you, I'm now I almost want to switch just so we can argue, but I'm the same way. I'm 3 and then 4. So 2, 3, 4, 5 in order.
We're chronological. We're both chronological. I've never been chronological before.
Yeah.
Have you? I think you might have been.
I think I have been.
I think you did it on Jaws. And maybe Superman.
Yes.
Okay. No, I've never done that.
On both.
I've never done that before.
Yeah, you have an abhorrent predilection for third sequels that is strange.
So again, we're kind of confirming this idea that they get progressively worse over time. But I think our good bad rankings will tell a different story. I have a feeling.
Yes. Which is I think it's fascinating to have to declare these movies. This is where you need it.
Because, we just sound like a couple of, snobby film critics who don't like action movies right now.
Mm-hmm. But I love them.
Me too. Let's find out how much.
Exactly right. Okay. Is Rambo First Blood Part 2 a good movie?
Fuck yeah.
Thank you. It's so fucking great. I love that movie.
I'm gonna hold back until we talk about the episode. But again, as a teaser, I am gonna say something that I have never said before about a movie and probably will never say again about Rambo First Blood Part 2.
But you're not gonna say it now.
No, because I want people to listen to the next episode.
And is Rambo 3 a good movie?
Very much so.
So I had an evolution.
Oh.
I started off going into Rambo 3 remembering and saying to myself, this movie was fucking awful. And by the end of it, I thought, that movie's really fun.
Fun is the operative word. Yeah.
And so, for me, good movie.
Great.
I'm okay with it.
Nice.
Now, what about Rambo 4?
You mean Rambo?
I think we both think Rambo 5. Sorry, yeah.
No, you
just
can call it Rambo.
Rambo Last 4. Blood. Can I assume that Rambo Last Blood, you're saying bad movie?
Yeah, I mean, I've already given my caveat, which is that there's some very interesting stuff in the beginning of the movie. It ends in a very satisfying way, but everything in between makes it a bad movie.
Okay. I agree. So I think it's a bad movie as well. Rambo 4, is this a good movie?
In the words of George Lucas, good enough. Yeah, I think it's a good movie. But I definitely struggled with that decision.
Oh, I am so on the fence about
really
that
hard.
movie. It's so difficult to definitively declare this movie as good or bad. Because like I said before, this movie is devoid of fun. Like the first 2 sequels.
Yes.
But I think that's purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Stallone's mind, he wanted something to harken back more to the original, and clearly he wanted to speak to the horrors of war. Because this is a gore fest, this movie.
It'd be interesting to see, and I don't have an answer to this, what came first. A movie about Burmese genocide or the idea of doing another Rambo? Did one help fund the other.
Well, I've got some good notes
Good,
on that.
good.
We'll wait till we get to the episode, I think. But
it is it's very much much like Superman 3. You know, it's a movie where the titular character is an incidental actor in his own story.
mm-hmm.
My feeling was, I mean, I had the same reservations. Again, I'm thinking about, you know, I'm thinking about the time in which it was released. This was clearly, you know, he was clearly trying to do a Rocky Balboa for the Rambo series.
Right.
It's definitely less successful than that. At the time, it was deemed an absolute
Agreed.
failure in a way that Rocky Balboa wasn't, critically.
Yes.
But I feel like the character, there's two things. The character of Rambo really comes out clear in a way it doesn't in any of the other sequels, and I've got to give that movie credit for that. Like, I buy this version of Rambo. I really do. In a way that I don't, and I don't care about in Rambo 3. Like, I don't care that this doesn't feel like
my
Rambo.
problem. All right, so I haven't even declared yet. So let me declare.
Sorry.
I think this movie's bad.
Okay.
And but I could go either way. I could say it's good, but with like heavy reservations, but I'm declaring bad with a little bit of regret.
Well,
so because I can see what you're speaking to about the most believable version of Rambo and all of these sequels. Like, if you just didn't have the first two sequels and he got out of jail and went to Thailand and this was his life, that would make complete sense to me. However, he makes choices in this movie that are not motivated, not explained, and essentially the whole movie just shouldn't have taken place to me. So in that way, it's bad. I just... You know,
anyway. I hear.
We'll get there when we get there. But...
I hear what you're saying. I am, however, I'm probably going to use your argument that so much of it seems deliberate that I think it's an overall success in what it's trying to do.
See, and that's the other thing that I struggle with is for what that movie wanted to do, I think it succeeds on that level. Mm-hmm. So it's so tough, but again, I think in terms of just sequels, it's the lack of fun that juxtaposed against the first two movies, which I really like, that makes me go, no.
Yeah, and that's
at the end of the day,
that's definitely
sorry.
For me why it's 3 out of 4 because First Blood Part 2 is very clearly it's a movie that tries to walk a tonal tightrope between serious and stupid.
Yeah,
and
it does it
really well,
marvelously.
Rambo 3 is pure fun and doesn't pretend to be anything else.
Yes,
this movie is no fun and doesn't pretend to be anything else. So,
right,
but you know that is definitely the least satisfying.
And I think you just hit on and I think you just hit on my overall why I have to say no to the movie is that it's an unsatisfying movie in that way. I think that's the perfect word.
Yeah. But you know, as a kind of answer,
but I can appreciate what the movie's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean it's
you know,
I think it's like. It's almost like it almost plays like an answer or a riposte to Rambo 3 in the same way Rocky Balboa did to Rocky 5. And I actually think it works as a sequel that is trying to undermine its own excesses and answer for them.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I think it's all trying to do that. And I'll say this, too. It feels like a far more legitimate end for that character than adding Last Blood does. I don't know what made Stallone say, I need to do something for this character again.
I don't think he can help himself. I really don't.
Because the fourth movie feels like a far more natural ending for the character altogether.
You took the words right out of my mouth, and I really don't think Stallone can help himself. Like any time he gets away with reviving a franchise and people liking it, he doubles down immediately. Mm-hmm. And people didn't even like Rambo.
Right.
And he still decided to make another one. Because I presume in his head he's like, well, now people didn't like that, I've got to answer the thing that didn't work. Even though the thing that didn't work was already the answer to the other thing that people didn't like.
Right, yeah.
So it's,
totally.
I just don't think he can help himself. He's recutting Rocky IV for reasons best known to himself. I think this like late career tinkering, again, George Lucas comes to mind. I just wanted to kind of end this more than Minisode, it appears, by saying that
we're gonna wrap up here.
There's a phrase that I heard on a podcast. The podcast is "How Did This Get Made?" And it was Jessica St. Clair, who I think is a excellent comedian and actress. And she I can't remember what Stallone movie they were talking about, but she said something that's always stuck with me about Stallone and makes me think immediately of the Rambo franchise, which is that he's a secret smart person.
Yeah.
That's my favorite phrase about Stallone, because when I'm watching these movies, I feel like they're made by someone who is smart but doesn't want anyone to know he's smart. Like a man who...
I think I have to agree with that.
A man who kind of understands cinema and what it can do and where you can go with it, but doesn't want anyone reading too much into what he's doing.
Well, I think we'll have an excellent chance to talk about that in our next episode with First Blood Part 2, when you consider that the first draft of that script was written by James Cameron.
I got a lot to say about that.
Okay, me too. So,
speaking of reading
ladies and gentlemen,
speaking of reading too much into it, I am going to read a lot of James Cameron into that movie.
All right. So, I think I have this correct when I say we are both in order. Yep. 2, 3, 4, 5. You say 2, 3, and 4 are good. 5 is bad. I'm saying 2 and 3 are good. 4 and 5 are bad.
So
we're close.
In answer to my question, I am deeper in the Stallone hellhole than you are. That's sufficiently
by
answered.
A smidgen, though, because I am almost willing to jump into that hole with you.
I'm basically like your Troutman at this point. All right, it's like
exactly.
I know you want to. I know you want to go.
Just accept who you are, Johnny.
I know you want to go. I know you have to go. Let's just dispense with the illusion, shall we?
I am the combat veteran of sequels. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for Rambo First Blood Part 2 coming up. For Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions, I am Michael Shantz from the How Dare You Awards. You'll be hearing us soon. Say goodbye, Tom.
God would have mercy. I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe 2 craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beers. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.